Every time I drop something it goes in the bilge. I should probably put the locker tops back on. Did I literally just hit my Stanley knife into the bilge? Yeah. This is the sort of level of competence you're dealing with here, people. So, welcome to episode 3. It's all well and good cracking on with the little jobs, and it's really gratifying to get those out of the way, and I'm really pleased so far, touch wood, with how most of them have turned out. But at some stage, I know I've got to tackle the big jobs. Now, I've done a few bits and bobs. I've given the boat a decent clean on the outside at least, and I have plodded on as far as I can with taking off the deck fittings, but they've been on, in the case of many of them, for upwards of 50 years. Some of them were put on before the hull and the cabin structure were sealed together, so are in incredibly hard to reach places. Some of them have been put on with really old, not even hexagonal nuts, and they're proving pretty tricky to get off. I have tried where possible, but I have now invested in a Dremel with a little cutting attachment. So today, at least the first part of today, is going to be spent trying to get as many of the remaining fittings off as possible. The boat has been cleaned and it has come up pretty well. I've taken off the majority of the old stickers, which is quite sweet because you can see the original colour of the boat underneath, and I've kept some of them for future reference. I have left on its current name in one place because I am told that it is exceedingly bad luck to change the name of a boat. So I need to perform a ceremony to dename it first of all. I have chosen a new name for the boat and I have registered it with the Small Ships Registry in that name. But before that goes onto the boat, I will then have to perform a renaming ceremony. So watch for those in a future episode. They involve rum, which I suppose is a good thing. The boat is currently pretty full of water because of the cleaning, and I have also, and I will sort of try and edit it in as a separate section, had an initial look into the keel. The long and the short of that is that I don't think it's massively problematic, which is good news, obviously. I don't think that the rust indications at the bottom are hallmarks of widespread water ingress. I think it is more likely that it has had a grounding or some sort of collision that has let in a little bit of water that has rusted in a small area. So I think we are not looking at having to take all of the ballast out, replace it, and so on. So that's a result. The water is a bit of a problem because obviously I kind of need to empty that out. I need to sand the inside of the boat, and to do that, A, I need PPE, which I've got, but B, I need to try and create as much ventilation as possible. So I've taken the decision to take the windows out first and then do the sanding, and then paint, and then worry about putting windows back in. I'm still in two minds as to whether to take down the headlining to have a look at the mast support beam, but I think that is probably also going to be necessary. So that needs to be while the boat is quite well ventilated as well, because that's going to be pretty horrendous. I need to take out the existing bulkheads. I need to take out the rotten wood. There's still a few bits and bobs hanging around. So the first step will be just to clear the boat out of water, and the second step will be to take the windows out, and the third step will then be to take the bulkheads out, and then the fourth step, if I've got time for it today, will be to crack on with the sanding. Yeah, that's quite a big list. Oh well, better crack on with it. So, water, and this stuff represents the first actual expenditure of items for the boat, rather than consumables like sandpaper and paint varnish and stripper and teak oil and whatever. The first purchase of things that will actually end up in the boat. In here is a 110 amp hour 12 volt battery. This is a 12 volt bilge pump, only a small one, and an adductor because it's a stupid size and doesn't have any screw fittings. And weirdly, although these hose lock adapters seem to spawn in my garage, honestly, I could stock a branch of Homebase with them. I didn't have one that went from 1 1/4 or 1 1/8 inch outlet on here to a small standard hose. So that's fine. I have another hose lock attachment. Now this is only a small bilge pump. First of all, I've noticed that the bilge on the Sea Witch is not enormous. Now my initial plan, if I just grab my Bible, was inspired by this. Now this is This Old Boat by Don Casey, which I picked up for a couple of quid second hand. It's older now, but honestly it's absolutely brilliant. It should be a Bible for anybody who is foolish enough to do what I'm doing on this channel. And he recommends that obviously you have a manual bilge pump, because automatic bilge pumps or electric bilge pumps are only as good as the electricity that they run on, and if your battery ends up underwater, they're not going to do much good. So always have a manual one, but they're cheap and they're easy to install. That's fine. But to try and keep as little water in the bilge as possible, he recommends that you have two, because if you think about it, if you're pumping out through a hose, let's say you're pumping out through a standard large diameter hose, and your bilge outflow is, I don't know, let's say it's 5 feet from the exit of your bilge pump. When your bilge pump turns off, whether via float switch or via you turning it off at the wall, all the water that's in there will flow back down into the bilge, which is why your bilge probably, he says, always has some water in it. So to reduce that, and also to reduce the cost overall, he recommends two bilge pumps, and he makes a very good argument for it. So the first is a small one, 1100 gallons per hour supposedly, but in practice that is measured if it's going horizontally, not if it's going vertically, so any vertical rise will reduce that. But reduced down to, I think this is a 13mm hose, hence the hose lock connector. And this runs automatically. This has a float switch in it, which you can just about hear. And it is always on, and when the bilge water gets above a certain level, it kicks off, it empties it. But because it's a narrow diameter hose, when it turns back off again, there is much less to flow back into the bilge. Separately to that, you have a much bigger electrically operated bilge pump around the sort of 4,000, 4,500 gallons per hour range, which you just toggle on and off as and when you need it. That has a full diameter hose, because by the point at which that comes into play, you are less worried about water in the bilge and you are more worried about getting the water out of the bilge. So that's the theory. I'm not entirely sure whereabouts these are going to end up being mounted, but for the purposes of today, all I'm going to do is basically connect this up to this battery and the hose, fire the hose overboard, and just use it to clear out what water's in there at the moment. So better crack on and do that really. Right, so we've got the battery. It's pretty heavy. In the spirit of whichever rule it is that says never throw anything away, I have kept a large bag of miscellaneous electrical stuff, wires, God knows, from our camper van conversion quite a few years back. So just for sake of ease today, I'm going to pop on witches' hats. The spanners are all out on the boat, so I can't fasten them on automatically. And then I'm not going to cut the hose, I don't think. I don't really want to because I don't know what sort of length I will need it to be at. So I will pop, I always forget to do that, pop this little adapter on here. And attach this on here. In theory, it should go. I might need to heat up the water a little bit, or heat it up in some water. Yeah, I'm just going to pop this in hot water to get it to expand enough to go on there. So while that's warming up, we got 3 wires. I have read the manual. Basically, the black wire goes to the negative terminal, and then there is a brown wire and a brown and white wire. And basically, the brown wire is if you want manual control through a switch, and the brown and white wire is if you want it operating automatically by virtue of the float switch. So for the purposes of this, I'm going to use the brown wire, and I'm just going to crimp on a little connector bucket. See, jam jars for the win, always. And before I get any comments about how badly it's wired, yes it is. This is literally just to get me through today and jury rig up the battery. Obviously when the actual electrics go into the boat, they will be soldered throughout, they will be sealed throughout, and I will do it properly. Anyway, I'm just going to tape over these last bits, and then hopefully find some connectors that will work, and we should be away. Okay, it's not doing anything, but that's right, I think, because it's set to automatic. So next step is to get that hose on, get it all out to the boat, and see if it works. Right, this is not going to be the greatest of camera angles. However, that's the water we're going to try it on first. That's basically what's come in while we were cleaning the boat. It's quite gratifying to see that it's all still there, actually, because at least it means that there isn't a leak through from the cabin to the bilge. This pipe is going over the side of the boat, and hopefully, if I turn this on, or attach it up at least, we might actually get somewhere. Let's find out. No. Okay. Well, that's a good start. Let's see if we can get any power. Okay, maybe it's just not deep enough. Let's try it. It appears as though it was working. So that's good. Oh, and this is all the stuff coming back out. That's what we talked about. Well, it's working. It's pretty noisy, so it's not like I'm not going to know when it's not on. But it's definitely working. I mean, there's a really long hose there at the moment, so a lot of water is coming back. And if I sort of show you the keel layout, it's not great. And I wonder really how much water is going to be acceptable, not in the keel layout, the bilge layout, is going to be acceptable because, you know, it's not going to fit in very many places. Let's see if it fits. See, it's not even going to fit under there, which I think is about the deepest point. So I'm not entirely sure. It doesn't really matter which side it goes on because obviously the water will find its own level. However, for the purposes of testing it, yeah, you know what, that's all right. That'll do for the moment. On with the next job. So yeah, windows. Not really in the greatest of condition, and doubtless one of the many points of entry, although obviously my taking the mushroom out of there hasn't helped. I mean, there's nothing for it really. They've been really badly sealed. They've just got to come out one way or another. And this probably isn't going to be very much fun. Okay, well, I take that back. Not really as hard as I thought it was going to be. I think the first one just wanted to lull me into a full sense of security. Let's see what's going on outside. Looks like outside seems to be the way forward. and that's the fourth. That went easier than I expected. So that's good. We got the windows out in about 5 minutes. Now I think it helps that I wasn't planning on keeping the surrounds, so I, Stanley knifed my way through them. I will keep them for the purposes of measuring up for replacements and things like that, but I won't be keeping them to use again. Now, the Perspex themselves, I think probably could do with replacing. Partly because in the front, if we're going to have a toilet, I want darkened glass, and partly because they're a bit knackered really. So, that's another job done. Turning into quite a productive day. Right, 5-minute break later, and it's Dremel time. Just to give you some idea of what we're dealing with in terms of stuff that's been on the boat for 50 years. Those are the underside of some of the stanchions, although weirdly some of the other ones are in quite good shape. So I'm just going to run through them hopefully relatively quickly with a Dremel, which if nothing else will at least let me to take them off. And yeah, new fixings were probably on the cards anyway. So the Dremel doesn't have a cutting tool. That's a bit of a pain. I mean, it's got about 97 different tools, but none of them seem to be for cutting. Anyway, I'm sure it'll still come in handy. I will postpone taking stuff off, although I have had a thought about the horse, which is in the garage. I have a tap spanner, which may just be the trick because the bolt is there, but there is no access from the top. Obviously it's all from the bottom, and that's the only sort of clear path, so hopefully I can get up underneath it with a tap spanner. But it's a relatively nice day. The sun's shining, so rather than don full gear and go inside the boat and sand, I'm going to initially just have a scrape off. So I don't even know what this is. Somebody has glassed in something somewhere along the line, and there's a sort of shelf thing over that side. As you can see, a lot of the wood is very rotten, so I'm just going to have a prod around with a scraper and see what I can get out, and then I will probably don the PPE and try and scrape some of this stuff back to something approaching the gel coat, and then leave it in a fit state to be painted and neatened up. A lot of things seem to be going my way today. Okay, the Dremel hasn't got a cutting tool, but that came out really rather easily. As you can see, however, that bulkhead is pretty knackered. There's a hole down there which I suspect is through to the bilge and is almost certainly for a manual pump. There was a sort of board fitted to the other side of this section here with 4 bolts coming through, so that makes sense. So that I will leave, and there's just a couple of bits that seem to have been glassed in over here, which I will remove, and then I'm going to don my PPE, get the orbital sander and the tap spanner, and see if I can't make a little bit of headway. I also need to figure out some way of getting rid of all this crud, because it's going to mount up quite quickly. You see, I do PPE. The only problem is I'm not sure what it's supposed to look like. A lot of the paint, I'm presuming it's paint, is just coming off in droves. But the stuff that's left on, that isn't coming off quite so easily, sorry, is yeah, I'm not sure. Like that patch there, I presume the sort of clearer areas are gel coat and the stuff on top is just sort of excess fiberglass put on it, but it's not really a paintable surface as it stands. I think I might need to do a bit more research. So instead, I'm going to do something which is perhaps slightly less delicate, which is to go inside and try and take out those bulkheads. This is probably not the best tool for the job, but I don't have much else out here. I don't really want to have to go back into the garage. Every time I drop something it goes in the bilge. I should probably put the lock tops back on. Did I literally just hit my Stanley knife into the bilge? Yeah. This is the sort of level of competence you're dealing with here, people. I've realised that while the windows are open, it's actually quite easy to get to both sides of stuff. So I'm going to try and get a few more bits and pieces off while I think of it, and then cover up the windows because I think it's going to rain, cover up the hole in the roof. I have created quite a lot more holes, but they're only little, so you can't win everything. And then I think I'll call it a day. That's pretty decent work.